It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and you could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show and all of our content, be sure and check out our Patreon, the Opperman Report Patreon. I got all the P. Diddy stuff up there, the indictments. I got a video of Jonathan Odie, who shot up, being interrogated by U.S. Secret Service in 2018, and he's talking about all this Diddy stuff. He sued Diddy himself, and his case is still open. That's a fascinating video. I got the Franklin cover-up, 700 pages there, all the recent indictments. I put up all that kind of content right away. So I got a hold of that thing, that Iranian dossier on J.D. Vance. I have that up there, too, on the Opperman Report Patreon. But if you go to our Spreaker, Spreaker.com, and you Google Janet Phelan, Phelan. She's been on several times before. Fascinating woman, always up to something. She's been an expert on many, many topics over the years, especially that whole Lyme disease. We never really talked about that with her. We have to do that one day. But if you want to check out her books, At the Breaking Point of History, How Decades of U.S. Duplicity Enabled the Pandemic, and another one called Exile, which we're going to be talking about today. Not the book, but what she's going through over there, because she is in exile. And you can find that at bookpatch.com. Otherwise, you can find all of her writings or articles at the Activist Post. Janet Phelan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for having me on, Ed.
Hey, it's always great to have you back. It's always great to have you. Remind the audience, though, if they don't remember, who is Janet Phelan?
Well, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for decades. I did my graduate work at the University of Missouri at Columbia in journalism back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I was forced to flee the U.S. in 2008, and I have now filed a lawsuit that is subsequent, that is directly connected to the reasons for fleeing, and I'm hoping that we can talk about the lawsuit today because it's taking some very weird twists and turns as it makes its way through the federal court system.
Yeah, 100%. I understand you're suing the CIA, which has to be an uphill fight. I guess we should start with what caused you to take off to Mexico back in 2008? Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, as basically the narrative of why I left is told in my book Exile, which is available at thebookpatch.com. And essentially, I became a person of interest and had some absolutely horrible things happening to me, and including unwanted police attention that had graduated to an assault on my person by officers of the law in Long Beach, California, which rendered me unconscious and into a hospital. So this wasn't any sort of airy-fairy kind of perception of threats. There were concrete actions taken against me, which were actually terrifying. And I decided in 2008, I was living in Southern Oregon. I was working as a reporter at the Americans Bulletin and hosting 2 radio shows every week, one on KSKQ, which is the local Pacifica affiliate, and also one on Republic Broadcasting Network. And the police, the misconduct began to be alarming again. And I chose to throw in my cards and leave. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Well, just to get this straight, your first problem with the police were in Long Beach, California, but then later on they continued in a whole other state in Oregon.
Right.
Right. Different police departments, of course.
The attention I've gotten and the reasons for the person of interest issue appear to be federal. So it's certainly not a local issue, which of course has graduated to my now suing. I'm requesting an injunction. I'm requesting no money whatsoever. I'm simply saying stop this. And stop what? The lawsuit, the request for the injunction, essentially connotes 3 causes of action, stating that 3 separate things are occurring to me that are illegal, immoral, and life-threatening, and that I'm requesting an injunction, which is stating that the court needs to instruct the CIA to stop. The reason that I am naming the CIA is that at this point in time, having fled the country, I'm in southern Mexico, and the Central Intelligence Agency is ostensibly the only federal intelligence agency that has the mandate to operate abroad.
Yeah, legally, yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, let me ask you this. Backing up just a little bit, what was it that back in Long Beach and in Oregon that caused, what were you up to back then that brought so much negative attention upon yourself?
Right. The situation it surrounds the murder of my mother and the subsequent cover-up. And that is the meat and potatoes of Exile. What happened to my mother? There are various, I'm big on documentation, Ed, and there is therefore an appendix of 50 plus pages in the back of the book containing external documentation. So if someone says, well, that couldn't happen, well, look at the records. These are external records, meaning they're court records, police records, medical records, etc. And so we, as I was attempting to protect her, I became increasingly aware that the parties involved in hurting her, and she was actually, quote unquote, legally kidnapped and disappeared. There was an attempt on her life, and then she ended up dead. So it became very clear to me that the parties involved in hurting her were not local parties. So as it became clearer and clearer to me who were the perpetrators here, who it was I had engaged, my own situation became more and more perilous. So.
And what would be the motivation going after your mother? Is she like an activist like you? Like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Is she like Janet Phelan out there like a muckraker causing trouble?
No, she wasn't. She was a retired clinical psychologist. My father was a muckraker. My father was a journalist. He had written for the Saturday Evening Post until the Post closed in '69. And at that point, he decided he wasn't going to work for anybody anymore. He was going to basically work freelance. And his articles ended up in Playboy, Esquire, Fortune, Forbes. He was essentially A-list. His first book came out in '76 and made the cover of Time magazine. So I think Dad really stepped into it in his reporting on the Kennedy assassination, vis-a-vis the effort by DA Jim Garrison to bring to trial for the assassination of JFK an individual named Clay Shaw. And my father's reporting on this actually resulted in history being impacted. He did a cover story for the Saturday Evening Post on this and ended up with a bullseye on his back. So,
and you think that was the cause of your mother's murder?
I think that the attention my father got resulted in attention to the family, but I don't believe that that's why my mother was murdered. Just briefly, when I talk about attention, my father at one point did a FOIA for his FBI file, and when he received it, he realized that even though a lot of it was redacted, there was some information in there, and he knew what phone call he made to whom, in which he parlayed this information. We were already concerned that the phone was tapped. Back when I was growing up, the technology was not as seamless as it is now, right. And there was all this whirring and spitting on the line. And as a child, I thought this was funny, and I started taunting J. Edgar Hoover on the phone, like, "Hey, J. Edgar, you listening to our phone calls now? I hope it's fun for you. Hey, J. Edgar, still wearing that dress?" That kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it wasn't funny at all. And so having received his FBI file, my father decided to go to the corner, to the payphone, to make his sensitive journalistic calls. So what I'm saying is that the family got on the radar that way. But the reasons for the murder of my mother, Emily Phelan, and the subsequent cover-up, which was profound, I believe, go to a far darker agenda, which we now see playing out on the world stage. Just to clarify, my mother was Jewish. My father was not. He had been brought up in a Catholic family and left the church as fast as his little legs would take him. But my mother was Jewish, and after surviving what had happened to her, I became very concerned that there was and is a profound anti-Jewish sentiment in certain sectors of the U.S. government, and I believe, and actually predicted in Exile, this war in Israel, which I don't believe is going to go very well for Israel. I believe Israel is going to be wiped off the map. And I have particular reasons for thinking that. And so having taken care of the 9 million or so, people who live in Israel, there then has to be dealt with those of us in the diaspora. And frankly, given the existence of this covert delivery system that I document completely at the breaking point of history, I believe that this particular delivery system could well be used to attack those in the diaspora under a complete covert means and plausible deniability. Now, all of this sounds very conspiratorial. Unfortunately, the events on the world stage seem to be bearing out my concerns. So that's what I think produced my mother's murder and this ridiculous vendetta that I'm now, experiencing and have brought to court under, these three causes of action.
Okay, you've mentioned a couple of times a covert delivery system. Explain what you're talking about there.
Right. The U.S.
I even had to look up diaspora. Okay, I looked up diaspora to find out what that meant. But I understand what that means. This, people dispersed around the world. But a covert delivery system. Explain that to me.
Right. So there exists, we know that the U.S. military has produced some daunting weapon systems, and these are, usually trotted out for some degree of public inspection. But one of the things that is not clarified or made clear to the public at all is that there exists a weapon system that is aimed at U.S. residents. Now, this involves the tweaking of city water systems to provide a delivery system for biological or chemical warfare. And those who are scratching their heads and saying, well, this is fantastic, I really encourage you, you don't have to buy the book. This system is well documented in the 2021 book, At the Breaking Point of History, with blueprints, letters back and forth between government agencies and more. But you don't have to buy the book. All the information about this delivery system is online and mostly available at activist posts.
Well, can you give us like an abbreviated version of what is in the water, and then how would they activate it, and how would they weaponize it?
Right. So what I have documented is not so much the contents of water, but the fact that water systems have been reconfigured to function as a delivery system. And they have done this in a actually rather diabolically simple way. There now are two main lines running down the street in, every city that I've checked in the U.S. Two main lines for water. One carries, obviously, water, and the other, we'll call it, line X. And line X is connected to the main line via service lines that cross-connect with the main line and go into every single house. Now, that's sort of concerning. Why would this system exist like this? And one can see from the documents that I culled before being forced to flee the country that the government isn't revealing this second line. If you make a Public Records Act request, for example, to a city water system, for blueprints, you'll get blueprints showing one line. But in fact, the real blueprints, which I was able to get through back doors, which I discuss, what kind of back doors extensively in the book, show two lines. So that second line is being covered up. Now, whatever is in the second line is being withheld by remote control valves. So if one wants to release whatever is in the second line, let's call it the vodka line, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's just say that they want to get people drunk, okay? So they've got a second line containing vodka, and it's being withheld by these remote control valves, which, by the way, I have the government on record as denying exists. And also, of course, I got some pictures of the remote control valves.
You have photographs of these second lines?
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, I know a lot of guys in construction, the home builders and even the developers and plumbers, and like plumbers working on people's regular plumbing lines, they would know about this second line. And my second question would be, then what about maintenance? Who is maintaining these second set of lines? They must leak. They must need repairs and upkeep and all kind of maintenance and stuff, right?
Well, I would imagine they do. But they at this point, they exist, and the contents are being withheld by remote control valves, and the government is denying this. And actually, I have one communication from the city of Los Angeles in which they said they wrote me, which is reproduced in the book, saying, yes, we understand that you want these blueprints, and give us some time because we're going to have to redact information, meaning we'll have to create entirely new blueprints for you. And lo and behold, the blueprints they produced were at odds with the blueprints I'd already gotten through the back door, which show clearly the two lines. The response to the Public Records Act request is to give me one line with no remote control valve. So why the cover up? Now, it's my understanding from various sources, I could name them here. I'm not sure if they'd be happy about that, but it's my understanding that this system was deployed during the pandemic in New York City, and resulting in more deaths than would have been naturally ascribed to the pandemic. So we have a system, that it can be used under plausible deniability to specifically target households.
And you have all this documented in the book Exile, which is available at
No.
No.
This is all documented in the breaking point of history.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. Okay, right. That's the other book that's available actually on Amazon. At the Breaking Point of History: How Decades of U.S. Duplicity Enabled the Pandemic. Janet Phelan. And that's on. You can find that on Amazon. 5-star reviews. I'm looking over here. 31 ratings. Must have sold a lot of books. Get that many ratings. So
the fact is, this weapon system exists. Now, the question is, of course, what is it going to be used for? Who is it going to be used against? And, this, in my thinking, Ed, there's no acceptable answer to that. You can't attack U.S. residents / citizens under plausible deniability under, no matter who they are. I mean, you simply can't do this. It's unconstitutional. It's against everything that our country ostensibly stands for. And so,
I'm going to kind of throw you a little curveball here, right?
Sure.
But when you're talking about this, the first thing it makes me think of is Flint, Michigan, where we know there's poison coming through the lead pipes there, and it's we've known this for a long, long time at this point, and they're not making any effort to repair this. Filters and stupidity and nonsense. And then the woman who discovered all this dies mysteriously. Have you factored that? Have you looked into that as to in conjunction with what you're discovering here?
Yes, and there's actually a chapter in At the Breaking Point of History about Flint. Actually, Flint is not the only town that ended up, with these lead pipes, which cause grave illness and disability. And there are other towns in Michigan which have been found to contain the same sort of, unfortunate pipes. And to my knowledge, nothing is being done.
Okay, so I guess the next step is, because we are starting to run out of time, is you file this lawsuit against the CIA, an injunction to prevent them from actively harassing you?
Yes. What I'm alleging, essentially, is called transnational repression. And transnational repression is something that the U.S. has made a big deal about in terms of foreign rogue states harassing their people who are now living within the U.S. And a sociologist named Dana Moss has proposed a typology for transnational repression, including lethal retribution, threats, surveillance, exile, all of which I've experienced. And unfortunately, the U.S. does not seem to want to cop to the fact that they're now engaged in this abroad. Even though, interestingly enough, China has accused the U.S. and the U.K. of transnational repression in the case of Julian Assange. So, my stating that this is happening is not particularly unique.
No. We see this. We see this firsthand. It just happened with Turkey, where they in D.C., where the Turkish goons attacked a bunch of dissidents. We saw it too with Iran, where the Shah of Iran when they would have those big protests in New York City. I saw this with my own eyes. They would go there and pull masks off people and take pictures of their faces. Firsthand, I saw this. So we know that this happens. And to think that the United States is not doing it, we're the most aggressive country on the planet.
Not the United States. No. Actually, interesting enough, Ed, the FBI has set up a tip line for transnational repression.
Oh, really?
So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll go ahead and call them and say, I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm living in Mexico, and I'm experiencing transnational repression. Well, the FBI agents who answered the phone, I called them twice, and then I just decided this wasn't going to work very well. And in both cases, the FBI agents were very pleasant and inquisitive until they started to get down to the bare bones about what was happening to me and why I was reporting this. And when I started mentioning these 3 causes of action, which are very well documented in the lawsuit, they immediately experienced some sort of a sphincter problem and had to get off the line immediately. So that was the end of that. Now, I'm alleging, basically, I'm not alleging in this lawsuit things that are dilatory. I'm alleging that I'm being attacked by unconventional weapons. I provide medical records to prove that the kinds of diagnoses I've now got, which are very scary diagnoses, are actually the effects of these weapons. And I have a statement from a doctor, a naturopath, stating, well, of course, renal failure can be caused by, an attack with a chemical weapon. Of course it can. So, and that's one of the diagnoses. So I'm also alleging that I am being denied medical care. And while I have all of these medical records, which largely come from a hospitalization that was incurred last year in Mexico City, I also have proof that the hospital and the doctors provided no treatment. So I have these very scary diagnoses which mandate a certain form of treatment, and I'm getting no treatment at all. So
do the doctors give you an alternative theory of what caused the renal failure?
No, they don't. They simply documented the renal failure, which the medical records show stage 5, which is,
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. That's the stage before death. Actually, that record was produced a year ago, and my understanding of stage 5 renal failure is that you have a few days to live. So I'm a medical miracle. I'm doing, obviously things with diet and herbs in order to try to protect, what health I have left. Okay, somebody presents with 5th stage renal failure. Yeah. The first thing you do is you get them on dialysis, and then you get them on a kidney transplant list. I was denied all treatment. I was discharged from the hospital without treatment. So that is one level of concern. So no, I didn't get on a kidney transplant list, and I didn't get dialysis.
Yeah, my brother was able to get a kidney transplant and also a liver transplant, and even then he had a stent in his fixed, and even a hernia. The guy's like the $6 million man. They replaced half of his body. That was like 30 years ago, man, and he's walking around fine, So let's pray you can get into some kind of treatment over there. So, but the Mexican government is denying you any kind of medical treatment.
Well, I'm not saying it's the Mexican government. I'm saying that there is a dark presence in my life that is instructing people as to how to behave. And this is further buttressed upon leaving the hospital. due to the secondary diagnosis, which has involved attacks on my legs, which has produced problems with walking. I actually fell and broke my hand, and I was forced to go back to another hospital to get this set. And there was no problem with the first contact with the hospital. A cast was put on my arm, and I was told, come back in 2 weeks and we'll just check the cast. I come back in 2 weeks, and the doctor insists on removing the cast. I have x-rays showing that the break hadn't healed, and he insisted on removing the cast and referring me to physical therapy, which would have essentially destroyed any possibility of recuperation. Lucky for me, I'm not stupid. I had the x-ray showing the break hadn't healed. I hightailed it to a pharmacy and bought a kind of brace and put it on my arm so that my arm would be immobilized even without the cast. So we have now multiple records showing heinous treatment from multiple different venues. And the third cause of action, which is also extremely well documented in the lawsuit, is denial of access to the legal system. And what do you know? The first thing that happened when this was filed, and it was filed at the Central District Court in California, was that it was immediately dismissed by the judge without proper reasoning. I immediately filed a notice of appeal. I'm now in the Ninth Circuit. So the initiating judge, whose name is John Holcomb, who dismissed the lawsuit, made some outrageous statements in the dismissal. Number one is that the U.S. has sovereign immunity and the U.S. cannot be sued, which means, of course, and this is very important, Ed, what it means is that the entire Bill of Rights is just toilet paper, because we have no rights vis-a-vis our government if we have no legal redress for when these rights are infringed upon. So that was one thing that John Holcomb said in his dismissal. He also cited a case, I think it was U.S. versus Smith, which largely discusses whether or not Antarctica is a foreign country. And he comes to the conclusion that because I'm outside of the U.S., I have no rights. Actually, there's a governing case, which is Reed versus Covert, which confirms that U.S. citizens residing outside of the country have all legal protections granted by the Constitution. So he went overboard in terms of attempting to dismiss the lawsuit and to dismiss it with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. So I have, I immediately filed a notice of appeal and am now in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. There are some other cases that have been filed, where there are allegations being made of that individuals are now on a kill list. One was around, I think, 2017 by a U.S.-born citizen who became also a journalist and was reporting for CNN and Al Jazeera and other venues in the Middle East. His birth name was Darren Phelps. He adopted the Muslim name of Bilal Abdul Karim, and he alleged that the U.S. put him on a kill list and tried to kill him in Syria. So, that's one case. His case was also dismissed. There are implications here, because if U.S. journalists are being put onto kill lists and being murdered abroad, and there's simply no venue for redress, then what does that say about anybody else?
And for people who are thinking, oh, this is far-fetched, just look back at the COINTEL program, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. How many of those people were murdered? Cold blood. Clarify a couple of things for me, though. You mentioned Antarctica. I heard you say Antarctica. Right? Well, how does that fit into all this?
No.
You didn't mention it.
It doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. Holcomb threw in a red herring in attempting to dismiss my lawsuit, stating that there was this case, U.S. versus Smith or Smith versus U.S. or something, in which, there's this extensive discussion of whether or not Antarctica is a foreign country or not, but it's irrelevant because the guiding principle is Reed versus Covert, which confirms that U.S. citizens residing abroad have full constitutional protections.
And you're still a U.S. citizen?
Yes, I am.
You've kept your citizenship, okay.
Absolutely.
Now, that in itself has a lot of difficulties in Mexico, right? Because you can't own property there and stuff like that. There's a lot of problems with that, right?
I rent. And there's not a problem. I rent.
Okay. Now, it must have been difficult even obtaining legal representation to take on this case. Well, tell us, what was that procedure like? You must have contacted 20 lawyers, right?
Yes. And I'm very grateful that I got profoundly good legal advice. Some of it was good, some of it was not so good. However, I am per se. I am not represented by counsel. I did get some behind the scenes advice, but no.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see that happening. I can't imagine anybody want to take this case, to tell you the truth. And I could, from my own personal experience, I could tell you. It's
Well, I actually I contacted the lawyers who took Bilal Abdul Karim's case and bailed, and they considered it for about a heartbeat and said, no, we're not going to take this one. So be it.
I got you. So now we are you're in the appeals court and you're appealing this judge's decision. Correct.
And I got a communication from the Ninth Circuit saying that my lawsuit was dismissed by John Holcomb with prejudice, and I needed to explain why I should be allowed to proceed. And I frankly decimated John Holcomb's arguments in a legal brief, which I have also put online, attached to a press release in Activist Post. I believe it's titled, "Is This Federal Judge Trying to Suppress a Civil Rights Action?" or some such thing. So I put John Holcomb's response, his ridiculous, pathetic response, and also, my reply to it. So now I'm waiting for the Ninth Circuit to weigh in.
Now, Janet Phelan, here's my concern as a practical matter. Let's say you get everything you want, and Judge Holcomb says, okay, Ms. Phelan, I apologize. We're going to put a restraining order against the CIA from bothering Janet Phelan. And the CIA receives this restraining order and says, we promise we're going to stop doing all this stuff. But of course, what would prevent them from not missing a beat? Do you really think that they would stop just for a court order?
See, that's a very good question, Ed. And that question has been proposed to me by one of the lawyers helping me behind the scenes. These people aren't going to stop. Okay? So, however, if I did not make this public, if I did not file the request for the injunction, if I did not make all of this bad behavior public, then what am I doing with my life? And what hope does anyone have for any sort of redress to a similar situation? We have to take advantage of the available venues. And, frankly, I have no idea what the CIA is going to do. They haven't backed off. They have been sent a cease and desist letter. they, have been noticed that they've been sued and they're not backing off. So apparently, Chevron decision notwithstanding, they believe themselves to be entitled to kill whomever they want.
Right. And the Chevron decision was the recent Supreme Court ruling saying that these agencies cannot create policy, something along that lines, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
That many of the policies that they're creating are, contrary to statutory and constitutional law, and they can't do that. Right. So we've got layers. I mean, we've got, what appears to be legal decisions which ostensibly should impact agency behavior. And then we have, on the other hand, the agency behavior, which is, basically just flipping off the Supreme Court.
Well, let me ask you a question now. When you sent the C&D to the CIA, the cease and desist letter to the CIA, did you get a response from them?
No.
Yeah. And then when you file this injunction, you got a legal response from them, right? Before Judge Holcomb? No response?
No. The response was that Holcomb immediately tried to dismiss the suit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So he's actually acting, one could say, as a proxy for the CIA.
I'm trying to rack my brain here if I've ever heard of that happening before, where without the response that the judge takes it upon himself to dismiss without being requested.
Yeah. Well,
I can think.
It can happen. It can happen.
It did
happen.
I can recall an instance where it happened, where I was involved. Okay, very, very fascinating stuff. So where are we? What's the next step? What are you going to do after this appeal?
Well, I'm waiting patiently to see what the Ninth Circuit does. It has had my answer for, good grief, like over a month, and I'm waiting to see how it weighs in. If it weighs in my favor, then it's essentially attacked the decision-making power of another federal judge, John Holcomb, and if it doesn't weigh in my favor, then it has attacked the Constitution. So, I think they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. I don't want to make any predictions about what they do. I'm just simply waiting to see how they will respond to this. But I have to, emphasize that this case, like the Kareem case, has massive implications for all of us. This is not just Janet Phelan being messed with in Mexico. This opens the door for any of us being messed with anywhere without proper redress. So,
you mentioned earlier that you discovered a kill list. Can you give us some details around that?
Well, we know that. Okay, I haven't discovered a kill list. Yeah. We know that American citizens have been put on a kill list prior because it has received media attention. For example, Alawaki, who was killed by a drone strike in the Middle East some years ago, was put on a kill list by Obama, and it got a lot of attention. Alawaki was also a U.S. born. He was a citizen. So this case seems to have opened the door to other U.S. citizens being put onto kill lists. How can this happen? I mean, doesn't the Constitution guarantee due process? And I don't believe that the determination of a president that this person has to go constitutes due process. Alawaki's family did sue the U.S. government over this. their case was dismissed by the same federal judge, Rosemary Collier, who dismissed the Kareem case. So, these cases get some attention, and then they kind of die off. But the implications of these cases are profoundly disturbing.
Janet Phelan, you can find Janet Phelan's book Exile at bookpatch.com, and you can find her writing at the Activist Post. We only have about 9 minutes left, and in our pre-interview, you were mentioning some stuff you were concerned about being very controversial. Is there anything you want to tell us about in the next 10 minutes?
Well, I believe that the conclusions that I have come to, that my mother was murdered as sort of a pre-sacrifice for an anti-Semitic agenda, is very controversial. People are very upset about the war between Israel and Gaza, and in fact, people are alleging that Israel is committing genocide. The war is not dying down. It's escalating, and it's becoming a war now with Hezbollah. There's also the fact that all this took place at the very time that it is rumored that Iran does indeed have now nuclear capabilities and can fulfill its promise to bomb Israel off the map. This has been verified on multiple different fronts. So, the question is, what happened? I mean, really, what happened on October 7th? How was the fence even breached without the IDF being involved or taking action for 8 hours? I mean, something is very wrong with the story, just like something has been wrong with other false flag attacks. But we're not getting any explanation for the breaching of the fence. We're getting resignation. Several IDF, officials have resigned over October 7th, but nobody has explained how this happened. But nevertheless, it happened.
One thing I find, I'm not big on false flags, like Alex Jones, like everything's a false flag, but clearly some things are. And I got to tell you something, man. The video footage we see there of the festival before the attack is just so bizarre. That's not a normal festival, like a real festival. They seem like they're acting, pretending to be at a festival. Have you looked at that?
No, I haven't.
And you don't see it. They don't see that video very much anymore. But the first day I'm watching this, what is this? Anyway. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? We only got about 5 minutes.
Well, I think we're in deep trouble, and I really appreciate your hosting, my presentation today and allowing me to speak my mind, because it does appear to me that things are not as they appear to be. And
one last thing, because you mentioned like the anti-Semitism of the U.S. government, but from all appearances, it would appear that the U.S. government is fully supporting Israel and arming them and all kinds of stuff.
And also funneling billions of dollars to Iran.
Yeah. Well, no, that was their money though. The international court said we had to return that money. It was their money.
International courts.
Yeah, that was money that we had seized during the Iranian hostage crisis. We had, there was a litigation in the international court, and we had to return that money.
Right. There's recently been some publicity to the fact that the U.S. is supporting immunity for Hamas workers who are also involved with UNRWA. So the U.S. is supporting immunity from prosecution. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that seems to indicate a deep-seated anti-Semitic agenda. And I'd like to just refer the listening audience to the blockbuster published in the mid-1990s by former DOJ prosecutor John Loftus called The Secret War Against the Jews, in which he rather devastatingly goes through decades of backstabbing by the U.S. Against the state of Israel. So I think we're living in a time of great deception.
Like I said, we only got about a minute left. On a personal note, how are you feeling you're physically?
Well, I'm crippled. I can't walk. I'm in end stage kidney failure.
Yeah.
And I wake up every morning, amazingly wake up, and glory be, I'm still alive. So I'm continuing to write. My articles are appearing on Activist Post and elsewhere. And I think that, things could be better.
Yeah.
And,
now, how about, do you have support down there, like people down there helping you?
Well, the being crippled has produced certain kinds of problems. So I do have someone who will do grocery shopping for me. Yeah. So,
and you would be okay with me asking the audience?
No, absolutely no medical care.
Yeah. You'd be okay with me asking the audience to pray for you?
Yeah.
Okay, I would ask the audience to please pray for Janet Phelan, who has dedicated her life to fighting the good fight, okay? And we're all getting on in years. We're all tired. We're all sick, myself included, okay? And then in our time of need, we need some support. Now, what about, do you have like a GoFundMe or a Patreon?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm not asking for any money. And I'm not asking for any money from the lawsuit. I'm just saying, stop this. This is what you're doing. This is the proof that you're doing it. Stop it. So
then you can support Janet Phelan by going to Activist Post and reading her articles and sending her words of encouragement. You can buy the book Exile at bookpatch.com, and the other book you can buy on Amazon, which is called, real quick here.
At the Breaking Point of History.
At the Breaking Point of History, How Decades of U.S. Duplicity Enabled a Pandemic. And you can go back to, we have that exact title from one of our, I think the first interview I did with Janet Phelan. Although I've heard about her for many, many years. I've known about this woman for since 1990s. To reveal both of our ages. Janet Phelan, we love you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Keep us updated on what's going on here. And if you ever need a platform, you got me backing you up here, okay?
Thank you very much, Ed. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.